Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for patiently listening by far and hopefully later as well. That's a selfishness on more, right? When I received a call from Vinay and he said that you want to speak on some book, I said that I read quite a few books. I'm not saying I'm a voracious reader, but I read a few books. And it took me quite some time to finally zero down on one of the books. The first book that I said he had refused a little, that was, he said that we do not want to talk about religion. And I was really shocked about why we do not want to talk about religion. Because if I have to define religion, there's only one way I define religion, and that is conscious thoughts and emotions. That's religion. And that is the reason, when we talk about religion and other things, there's only one thing that should come to mind. And then the only second book that came to my mind was Virtue of Selfishness. That how can we be selfish, and is there a virtue for selfishness? This book is written even before I was born, and continues to be one of the largest read, and focuses on multiple aspects. And that's what I like most about this book. 168 pages. I have 44 slides on that. I'm not going to go through all of them. But what it really tells us about common sense. And I always say that nature follows path of least resistance. So wherever there is a least resistance, things go naturally towards that. And nature follows path of least resistance. Simultaneously, when we talk about the common sense also we very vaguely define as something that's not very common. And that is the reason that we must know what is a common sense as well. And common sense is the ability of a person to render sound and practical judgment on everyday matter. Now, having defined what is common sense, the important thing today is to challenge common sense. Because if there is a common sense, if there is a common wisdom, today we are at an inflection point where we must always challenge common sense. And one single example that I give about common sense is how many people are afraid of flying, and then unless you have a high altitude phobia, nobody is afraid of flying, but everybody, including pilot, is afraid of crash landing. So when we challenge common sense, we realize that, well, people are not afraid of flying. And that's why I zeroed down on this book. And it has multiple aspects. At the end of my presentation, I'm sure I'll not be able to justify this, but that is my limitation. It is not the limitation of the author to talk about selfishness. It's my limitation that I will not be able to talk to you at length about it. And there are certain questions which will come eventually, again for a chocolate, but now I'm supposed we are not giving that for the comment we are. But nevertheless, even those questions, I'm not very sure whether I will be able to answer it in the same sentiment that the author has put virtuousness as. But let's see why this book really impressed me. Let's come to this, a successful organization is. If you want to realize and understand what a successful organization is, probably the organization has to be very profitable. And if it is profitable, it has to have sustainable profitability. As earlier also it was pointed out that the organizations have a lifespan of 50 years, 54 years. But if it has to be profitable, then it has to be under the 400-500 concepts, etc., etc. So we are talking about some concepts. We are talking about the organization which is profitable. Now, every profitable organization is not necessarily a successful organization. Sometimes when we look at the organization's success, it could be by virtue of what is the market capitalization that the firm has done. It could also be the amount of employment that the organization has generated. So there are multiple ways of looking at the success of a particular organization. Now when we are trying to understand every organization, how far that has been successful, we have to look as to what the purpose with which it started off. And that is the reason that we look at this book differently. Now, to run this kind of organization, we have to consider basic things like taking right decisions and not popular decisions. Let's understand that right decisions are not necessarily popular decisions. And what we tend to do is take popular decisions than taking right decisions. And now, who is going to decide what is right and who is going to decide what is popular? This book tends to address that. And what warrants high degree of understanding of being right and what are the concepts? Like, we have multiple concepts which are developed by the organizations. I'll just take one example. That's the opportunity that is presented to me that a few people have already talked about some successful organizations like Indigo, a no-frill airline, and they're replicating that model, that particular concept into no-frill hotels also. Now, whether that is really bad or good, the success of the organization decides. So there are certain concepts which are to be developed. Then there are values. Value is always in the eyes of a beholder. Something that is of value to me cannot be value to the other person. And something is of value to me may be of non-value to me in latter stages. And that is the reason that how do we universally define value is an important question, and that's what this book addresses to. We all look forward to productive work on part of the employees. Now, who is going to decide what that work is really productive and how productive that has been for the organization? So the book talks about productive work as well. Happiness. Now, how do we really define happiness? It's again extremely difficult, and happy employees tend to be with the organization, then how are we going to keep them happy? Happiness maybe for somebody it could be the money, as we have seen in the last presentation, that it could be money, it could be recognition, it could be multiple things. Now that's what we are trying to understand, what is the happiness. The most critical area while making a decision is black, white, grey. Now if black is all that bad and white is all that good, how does grey come into as a mixture of the two? Now this book very clearly tells us what is black, what is white, and whether grey is good or no. And if there are shades of grey, whether we should go for it or we should not go for it, that's what this book really puts emphasis on. And the applied thinking, interestingly, think was another thing that we discussed about, maybe not to the extent because of absence of Ranjit, but think is decision making, what actions to take and thus a choice. So whenever we are making a decision, most of the time when I ask people about a few things that we get some way in kind of program, like if bactericide is killing bacteria, if fungicide is killing fungus, if pesticide is killing pest, if germicide is killing germs, then what is decide? We just get into a pattern and then we are not in a position to analyze as to what we are killing. Because the CIDE finally decides that whether what we are killing, and many times we kill some alternatives. When we make a particular choice, we kill alternatives. Now, this particular book also helps us understand as to what kind of choices should we make. That choice, whether it has an element of black or it has an element of grey. We'll come to a few quotes from the book and then we will try and understand that how good it could be. Problem solving is regarding solutions, answers or conclusions. Because every organization look forward to employees who are giving them solutions and not really deciding or defining what are the problems. Many people do come up with the problems, but that's not what the organizations are looking forward to. They want solutions for those problems. Defining a problem is equally important. I'm not saying that it's not important, but at the same time what is important is giving answers, solutions, or maybe the conclusion. Every organization cannot continue in the same way. So if the conclusion is to discontinue that, that's what classically Bajaj did, of closing down their scooters and doing outstanding with the motorcycles. So sometimes you have to come to a conclusion and take a right decision, not a popular decision. Again here it was a very tough decision for Mr. Bajaj to take, what his father built fortune of. So that was a right decision, not a popular decision. Maybe even his father was not very happy. And then creative thinking, there is new ideas. Every time we have to think about the new things in order to succeed in the organization. And that's what this book puts light on. And that's why I like this book most. Now, every organization, what they look forward to is building a big organization. And this is where the concepts really come into the picture. We did talk about some of the organizations' lifespan, etc., but the only organization which really succeeded this was General Electric, which was among the first 100 companies in the year 1900 and also among the first 100 companies in the year 2000. So 100 years span, but was still among that, and primarily that was because of the concepts that it developed in while doing multiple businesses. So how to develop a concept is that this book talks about. It's also about mind to perceive clearly defined, I insist on the word, clearly defined rational goals. Not necessarily every goal is a rational goal. So let us be rational about goal setting as well. How to set up rational goals, again this book throws light on, and what are the right goals for a man to pursue. We're just seeing as to various quadrants and where you probably are wishful thinker, your only wish, maybe you are dreaming something, but how to make dreams reality, again this book will tell us. And what are the values his survival require. Every time we have to have certain values associated, and I mentioned about values is that values is something that is in the eyes of a beholder. This book, how clearly defines this is what we will look at. Now, why to be selfish? Because this book really caught my attention in 1997 as to why one has to be selfish and is it really good? Now, it's not man's ancestors and relatives and genes or the body chemistry that count in a free market, but only one human attribute, productive ability. It is by his own individual ability and ambition that capitalism judges a man and rewards him accordingly. Think about it, unless we are productive in our work, there was also reference about the creativity. What is creativity? Again, going back to the religion and understanding that one more time. Creativity, every religion has said God is the creator of the world. That's what every religion has said. But to me, the more creative you become, more godly you become. And thus God must be creator of the world. We call Sachin Tendulkar God of cricket. We don't call him God everywhere. But he was very creative in cricket. So the more creative you become, more godly you become. And that's what we look at, individual ability in contributing. Now, how do we become creative and how the market rewards? We have to be selfish about that. We also look at why not be selfish? Bearing sole responsibility for own survival, no man can permit or could permit himself the delusion that tomorrow is not his concern, that he can safely rest on yesterday's knowledge, skills, and that nature owes him security. This doesn't happen. We have been successful in the past doesn't necessarily mean we will succeed in future or we have a security. There are multiple things, and that's why a person or individual has to be continuously creative. And that's why I always looked at the VMA catchline, whether you are invested in yourself. Okay, that's what we've been always talking about, and that's what investing in self is, to ensure the security for future. So what is this? Is selfishness is not merely wrong. That's what the general understanding or the common wisdom is, or the common sense is. It represents a devastating the intellectual package deal, which is responsible more than any other single factor for arrested moral development of mankind. Now, this arrested development takes place because we tend to look at selfishness extremely negatively. But selfishness is concerned with one's own interest. Nothing wrong about that. If we do not look at our own interest, then who else will look at our interest? And that's why if the future is not secured, or future doesn't tend to be secured, simply because we are not investing in ourselves at that particular moment. Now, the moral questions is, what are values? Because every time when we say that people have to live with the values, what are values, and who should be the beneficiary of these values? What the altruists are the people who feel that a lot of social work, etc., to be done. We will come back to that issue in the later stages. But altruists declare that any action taken for the benefit of others is good, and any action taken for one's benefit is evil. Now, this is what is the contradiction. A selfish person, if I am investing in myself, am I selfish and am I evil? And this is what commonly people feel about. And thus the beneficiary of action is the only criteria for moral value, which is not true. If the beneficiary has to be third person, then I am doing something ethical, I am doing moral, that's absolutely correct. And that's why this book keeps continuously challenging the common wisdom or the common sense. Next one. There are a few organizations which have been run on the whim. The only organization that comes to my mind, I don't know whether I'm right or no, was T-Series, when Gulshan Kumar was managing that. That was more by whims than some constructive architecture in the organization. A desired experience by a person who does not know and does not care to discover its cause. I'm not demeaning the work that was done by Gulshan Kumar, but that organization never had the strategies, never had some very specific objectives of achieving something, except being selfish. And the ultimate value is that final goal or end to which all lesser goals are means, and it sets standards by which all lesser goals are evaluated. So whenever we are talking about the evaluating parameters or the selfishness or the values, we have to look at the final value that we are going through. Since the time is very limited, as I said, that the problem with this particular book is that 168 pages, all 168 pages are extremely enlightening. I'll just take you through a few things now. These are already there because I was asked to submit a synopsis, so this whole thing itself is a synopsis. Let's look at the value, the ultimate value and the corresponding virtue. Reason, the corresponding virtue is rationality. Are we rational in reasoning what we are doing? Purpose, productiveness, what for we are doing it, what will the productivity, and self-esteem, the corresponding virtue is pride. So we talk about selfishness, we are looking at the self-esteem and the pride as well. This is what is the concept. These are all definitions which the book has given or maybe they have talked about. Man's action and survival require the guidance of conceptual values derived from the conceptual knowledge, but the conceptual knowledge cannot be acquired automatically. So you have to still put efforts into it, understand it, and then probably it becomes a concept. Okay, next please. It also is about using concept. Man's sense organ functions automatically, but the formation of the concept is not automatic. And that's why there are sense organs, they function, but then the concept that this is something good for me, maybe something that I feel is good, brain has to still evaluate that looking at it is good or bad. And that's what we look at, is it's not automatic. Yes, next thing. It's also about developing concepts. Thinking is not an automatic function. I mean, just the bottom line that I wanted to come to. Yes, next thing. It's also about ethics. It is not a mystic fantasy, not a social convention, nor a dispensable subjective luxury to be switched or discarded in emergencies. So even in emergencies also, we have to have the moral values and ethical values which the book very clearly defines. Yeah, thanks. Is everyone selfish? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, everyone is selfish. But it's the ethic code of values to guide man's choices and actions. The choices and actions that determine the purpose and the course of his life. I'll just take you to the final thing that I would like to take. This is about the emergencies, selfishness, and sacrifices. Let's say this irrationality is impossible. It is that which contradicts the facts of reality. Facts cannot be altered by a wish, but they can destroy the vision. Please understand, we cannot really go for a wish. And this is the importance of being rational. Pleasure of being drunk is obviously the pleasure of escaping from the responsibility of conscience. And that's what I said, it's very, very important to be selfish and be rational about it. It does require the compromises, but there is no compromise on moral principles. In any compromise between food and poison, it is only death that can win. In any compromise between good and evil, it's only evil that can profit. And this is what is really impressed me about this book, and I thought of sharing it with all of you. These all transparencies will be here, sorry, the slides will be here. These are about the man's right and also about the collective rights. It is my limitation that I cannot summarize it in the 15 minutes of time. It's not the author. I very strongly recommend, in the event if you get opportunity, please read this book. It helps us in redefining some of the concepts, ethics, moral and values. That's what I wanted to say from my side. Many thanks.